Our first session is going to be amazing. It's part of the Founders Series, and it's all about your future bank experience. You're going to hear about the journey from seed to Series E and about building a sustainable business model and navigating the path to profitability. I'm going to introduce our moderator for this next session. He's a technology reporter based in London, covering a range of topics from fintech to video games. Ladies and gents, it's the first session here on the Agora stage. I want you to give your biggest, warmest welcome to our moderator for this first session from CNBC. Please welcome to the stage tech reporter Ryan Brown. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a hard one to keep the speed.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for what I'm sure is going to be a very fascinating fireside chat. And I'm glad to say I'm going to be joined by Maximilian Tayenthal, the co-CEO of N26. Maximilian. Maximilian, thanks very much for joining us. How are you doing? How are you enjoying MWC so far?
Great. Thanks for having me today. Always happy to come back.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it wouldn't be MWC if I wasn't getting a little bit lost on the way here. Very nearly running late, but luckily just about made my way. Max, we're going to be talking about lots of key issues today. You know, obviously, the whole idea of your future bank experience and what that entails. But I think the elephant in the room here that a lot of the telco and mobile bosses we're talking about today is the Ukraine situation and the war in Ukraine. I just wanted to start off by asking you, Maximilian, about kind of how N26 is responding to that conflict in terms of providing, your colleagues with support and any other efforts that you're making.
Yeah, perhaps first of all, sharing my personal feelings. It was an extremely sad week last week. Like N26 is employing, I think, 20 or so Ukrainians and many more Russians. And as a European, but also as an entrepreneur, it's obviously development that made us thoughtful and quite sad. What we did at N26, and I guess like many technology companies are trying to support their way, we introduced the donation button into the app. I think it took us 12 hours, so people can really support the Ukrainian, our customers can support the Ukrainian people.
Totally. And just when you look at, this huge conference and the amount of big names here, I mean, Samsung and Ericsson and others, just to name a few, I mean, what would you like to sort of see some of these tech industry leaders doing to respond to this?
I think we already have seen some good things happening. I think it's everything from providing free flow of information to providing finances like ourselves, but also providing the right infrastructure, like Elon Musk and his company providing, his satellite infrastructure to maintain the internet for people in Ukraine.
And obviously, we're here to talk about kind of the future bank experience. And first, I just want to touch on, N26 and some of your journey over the past few years. Started out in 2013 out of Berlin with your co-founder, Valentin. Just looking at how far you've come, you're a $9 billion company now. I mean, speak to me about some of the kind of, challenges and hurdles that you've faced along the way. Obviously, as you kind of grow into that, market value, you're going to face a few hurdles along the way in terms of kind of regulators such as BaFin, obviously, scrutinizing the business. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I think the last 9 years since we founded the company, it has been an extremely rewarding journey. It has also been quite a challenging story, as someone can imagine. If I think about challenges, they come from a number of areas. I think one, the war for talent is getting increasingly difficult. Sometimes people ask me, what's the biggest cost you incur at N26? I usually say it's the opportunity cost, because we cannot find enough people to tackle all the no-brainer projects. Thinking about Barcelona, we have a team of 140 people. We have 50 open positions here. We have 1,000 open positions at N26 that we want to fill in the next 12 to 24 months. So war on talent is a challenging one. I think regulation, to be honest, is also an interesting one. We started as a technology company, and on the way, growing into one of the fastest growing banks in Europe, definitely the fastest growing bank in Germany. We also learned that the expectations of the regulators, the scrutiny of the regulators has also increased over time. I think it's also a challenge, like culturally, to maintain the mindset of a fast-growing, flexible startup, to maintain this highly regulated banking environment.
And obviously, fintech is a big theme at the event this week. But do you think that kind of regulatory scrutiny, is it kind of exclusive to fintech, or is it just sort of felt much more stringently if you are starting a fintech business, given all the sort of ins and outs of helping people manage their finances?
I think it's fair that you have a different level of scrutiny and regulation, certain levels than other. I think in generally, and that's fair, the same level of scrutiny should be applied, regardless of whether it's a challenger or whether it's an established company. There's obviously also other areas where regulation is quite tough, rightfully so. If you're like doing something in aviation business, for example, or if you do something in like health tech, like bringing new medications to the market, I think it's the same kind of thing. So I don't think it's exclusive to fintech. But it's definitely something that culturally is not an easy one to cope with for like many like players in the fintech space, that usually don't build a team with people that have like built their careers in say other banks, but they usually it's like tech companies in a way, and a lot of the competitive advantage and a lot of the like improvements in user experience also comes from the fact that the teams there and the backgrounds there are quite different than in traditional companies.
And obviously, I imagine we've got a lot of founders of businesses who are just getting started out, and when they look at a company like N26, where you've come so far over the years, this war for talent is very interesting. How does a sort of seed stage or Series A company kind of compete for that talent? How do they kind of get the right compensation packages to attract more employees?
Yeah, I think when it comes to compensation, it is obviously hard to compete with a later stage company. We raised like 1.8 billion to date, and a big chunk of that is going into salaries. I think all of the rounds we have seen lately is going into salaries. We also had to acknowledge that there's a massive inflation of packages. Like many of the record fundings over the last years, also in Europe, are going into compensation packages. But at the same time, I don't think you can get people like purely for the salaries. Like what early stage companies can offer is just a different thing. I think again, like they're even quicker developing like than companies like N26. While N26 also gets great people, even though the packages we can pay on at least on the money side is still smaller than if you go to Google or like other established players. But we can actually make up for that by putting very nice ESOP packages together. I think we have also invested heavily in flexibility of work. So we moved to a like remote first working environments where people can actually work not from our offices but from other cities or even from other countries, and we have just doubled our ESOP package. And I think like with this one plus very flexible setup when it comes to policies, I think also like early stage companies can be competitive. On the salary side, like if you remember for which kind of packages we actually got people like back in the days, I think it's quite hard to be competitive with companies that have gone through 5, 6, 7, 8 rounds of funding.
And what would your advice be to kind of some startup founders who are looking to get some of that venture money to perhaps fund some of that growth that you were talking about?
I think it's easier than ever to raise money for for fintech. I think back in the days when we started in 2013, we actually started before the big fintech wave came, and at that point in time, you hardly found anyone that wanted to fund a fintech company. I remember we raised our seed round with Early Bird Ventures, and by that time, there was the biggest fund. It was a 100 million euro fund. It was the biggest fund outside of London in Europe. I think today you have like at least 15 or 20 funds in Berlin alone that have these kind of pockets of money that maintain 100 million euro funds. So I think there's a lot of money on the table, and I think right now, I think also investors understood that fintech is an extremely interesting field because it's one of the few fields that have not been fully disrupted by new technology, by new players. So it's still an area of biggest opportunity. When we founded N26 in 2013, I believed, and this is still what I say today, that financial services is the area most ready for disruption. So it is an area of tremendous opportunity, and that's also like why a lot of money will continue to flow into that space.
And returning to the subject of fintech, I mean, as you said, there's so much investment flowing into this space, but when we look at the topic of today's conversation, you know, your future bank experience, I'm curious to get your thoughts on where is the future bank experience going to come from? Is it, you know, these high-growth fintechs who are getting all of this VC cash? Is it the banks, or is it perhaps even the technology company like Meta or Google?
I think because in banking, the trends are really long-term, and many of these trends have already started, I think it feels for me it's quite easy to predict. There's a transition in the financial service space, the same transition you have seen in other spaces. It's a transition from offline, people used to go to the bank branch, to online, people started to do banking on the browser, to mobile, like people started banking on their smartphones. And the interesting thing is that in financial services, this transition is happening much slower than it used to happen in other markets. If you think about travel, for example, like us from booking all the travels in the travel agency to us booking all the travels like online, it was a transition of 5 years. From us buying the CDs at the record store to us downloading all the music online or like consuming all music online was a transition of 5 years. The same is like if you think about videos, you know, us renting our videotapes at Blockbuster to us like consuming everything online was a transition of just a couple of years. In banking, this transition is actually happening significantly slower. But we can say, you know, that bank branches will continue to close. I think there will be a consolidation also in the fintech space. I think the unbundling of financial services will continue. You know, originally it was all the banks that used to provide all kinds of financial services. And in the meantime, you have like young players, your fintech innovators for literally like any space. You can name it, like peer-to-peer lending, peer-to-peer payment, insurance, investment, crypto, and all the other spaces. And there will be players like N26 that are rebundling some of these financial services again. So if you come to N26, we're not only providing like the account experience for you, but we're also working on crypto and trading. You will get like lending, insurance, and you will get services in many other verticals.
And just before we move on to kind of what's next for N26, I mean, another one of the big challenges I feel that fintech is now facing at that kind of, you know, maturity curve is fraud. You heard PayPal warn about this in its results recently about the amount of kind of, you know, illegitimate users that it had to kind of essentially erase from the platform. What is the situation like at N26 when it comes to fraud? Are you dealing with a similar sort of situation, and how do you respond to that threat?
No, absolutely. Fraud is and will continue to be a massive threat for the entire industry. I talked about like the banking business, financial services are moving online. The same is true for fraud. We have seen a massive spike during the Corona pandemic. We have seen a massive spike in all kinds of online fraud. What should be the response of N26 to that? It should be the same response like we are using for improving like the user experience of our customers. We actually have to fight fraud by using like smart technology solutions. I think we have the ambition when it comes to fraud to also be the European technology leaders when it comes to fraud prevention. I think it's fair to say we have not been there. I think or we are not yet there, but we continue to invest more and more into fraud, and we continue to treat it as one of our most important priorities.
How much roughly would you say you're kind of investing specifically into fraud?
I know that like we invested 25 million in the last year alone. I think we have doubled or tripled our AFC teams in the meantime. There's like at any point in time, as you know, it's 100, 150 people are working purely on fraud prevention at N26, and we're also investing heavily into the technology solutions.
Right, and obviously there's lots of kind of bad actors looking to exploit fintechs, but I mean, at the same time, there's so much innovation happening in the sector still. Talk to me about kind of how N26 looks at the future bank experience for, you know, its own kind of technology product. You're talking about expanding into crypto and stocks and some other potential areas. Talk to me a bit more about what that would entail.
Yeah, I think when we think about like the service we want to provide, it's about like brilliant basics. You just have to provide a good banking experience. You have to provide for every edge case that might happen. You have to provide great customer service, and then you want to have a couple of sharp edges. You know, why actually customers choose N26. Like the things we right now are very excited about is the launches of new like products. I think later in this year, we are going to launch crypto. We are very close to our customers, and when it comes to prioritizing new features, new products, we always take like the wishes of our customers as the most important guideline. And we know that crypto is one of the most demanded features of our customers. So that's something we're going to launch in the next couple of months. And the second one is trading. At N26, we very much believe we want to be a partner of our customers. And we very much think on how we can help our customers to solve the problems. And I very much believe that giving people access to public markets, you know, for many of our customers, investing into public markets is the one and only way to provide a certain level of wealth in a negative interest rate environment. So that's also something we find very exciting. And then, you know, we really want to be at every point in time, we want to improve our product, just providing a better user experience for all of our customers, and still investing into all these topics, like be it fraud prevention, be it like really ironing out all the issues we might have for any customer or any customers encounters, like anywhere when using N26.
Well, I think that's a good point perhaps to end the discussion, because I realise we've run out of time. But thank you so much, Maximilian, for joining us. Really interesting discussion. I hope you all enjoyed it. And thank you again for coming and having a watch.
Thanks again.